Welcome to the Public and Protective Services Committee agenda for December 5th. On the committee is myself, Mike O'Connor, Councillor Bosch. Councillor Toole is away unless he's online. I don't see him. And Mayor Clayton. We'll call a meeting to order. There are no delegations. And under 3 reports, I'll go to 3.1 and Chief Lemieux, you're on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So an update from the Community Social Development Department. We have hired a community inclusion assistant. That's a full-time position that's dedicated to collaborating with service providers, employers, and ethno-cultural groups. The role of this individual is a part of the partnership with the Rural Renewal Stream and focusing on identifying barriers and opportunities to improve the quality of life for newcomers in our community. And on the community building youth future, I'm pleased to announce that we've received additional funding in the amount of $55,000 from the Tamarack Institute. So this funding will be earmarked partially for bus subsidies for schools to attend the Youth Career Discovery Expo, which is happening in March. With regards to the Passionate Heart event that's coming up on February the 14th, 2024, nominations and ticket sales have opened on Friday, December 1st. So that event will be held at Bonnet's Energy Center again in 2024. And with regards to the Opioids Don't Discriminate exhibit, approximately 340 residents attended the exhibit. So very successful there. From the Housing and Homeless Initiatives Department, the CARE Campus Renaming Subcommittee held its kickoff meeting, and it's an excellent start to naming options, and the committee is excited to contribute to options for Council's approval. And our federal representative for the Federal Reaching Home Funding, they visit the City of Grande Prairie and our homeless Housing and Homeless Initiatives Department twice per year, so they were in town a couple of weeks ago and met with the department, and are very pleased with some of the activities and initiatives that we have undertaken. From the Enforcement Services Department, we have been receiving some complaints of undesirable activities in parking lots at the Community Knowledge Campus and along 68th Avenue. So the Enforcement Services Department will implement a no loitering signage across the Community Knowledge Campus in response to these concerns. And this decision follows a thorough investigation of the concerns and engagement with stakeholders associated with the Community Knowledge Campus. So the primary purpose of these signs is to deter gatherings and undesirable activities in the campus parking lots. And the emphasis will be on educating potential violators. Enforcement measures will be considered only as a last resort. Grande Prairie Enforcement Services is currently hosting a staffing action to recruit more peace officers and a peace officer sergeant. And during this reporting period, we have a number of new employees in Enforcement Services, so they've been participating in unconscious bias and addressing racism in the workplace training. From the Fire Department's perspective, this year, the Grande Prairie Firefighters Charitable Foundation has donated $10,000 to schools for their daily support of students with breakfast and snacks. And the foundation is a charitable foundation run by city firefighters who are passionate about making Grande Prairie a better place to live. And 100% of the money raised goes to families and individuals in need in the Grande Prairie area. From the RCMP, the final town hall took place at the Teresa Sargent Hall on Thursday, November 30th. And the virtual online survey engagement was also very well received, and residents have provided valuable feedback that will be used by the RCMP in their annual planning. From the RCMP, again, their Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee had their first meeting in November, and they plan to be active in the community throughout 2024. Their goal is to link in with diverse community groups within Grande Prairie in order to focus on and identify the needs of the community. From Mobile Outreach has received federal funding from the Public Safety Canada Building Safer Communities Fund for the prevention and outreach programming to address youth risk factors associated with gun and gang involvement. So that program is underway. From the Community Knowledge Campus, the Come Together Christmas Campaign kickoff event held at Eastlink Center on November 21st was a huge success. The combined forces of 2 Pattison Media-owned radio stations will support several nonprofit agencies to make Christmas a little brighter for those less fortunate. Now, this campaign replaces the former Stuff-A-Bus and Big Toy Box donation drives that you may be familiar with. So donations for these programs can be dropped off at Eastlink Center until December the 10th. And on December the 2nd, the membership sale day and free facility access was a tremendous success. And the sales total for the Become a Member this December membership drive were increased from last year's campaign. I don't have the final numbers, but we'll get those for you during my next update in January. And Holy Days sales will end December 23rd. So those gifts available for purchase include gift cards, punch cards, corporate bulk buys, and other items. So passes can be redeemed after December 27th and until the end of December 2024. And the wildly popular mystery gift card sales began at 7 a.m. and on December 1st, and they were sold out by 8 a.m. So a very popular program again. And thanks to KMSC, the sponsored free public skate on December the 3rd had maximum capacity at 150 participants. Mainline Construction is sponsoring the next free public skate, and we appreciate their sponsorship. And Piranha's Christmas Cracker Swim Meet will be held on December 9th at the Aquatic Center. And lastly, Sports Development, Wellness and Culture, in collaboration with the Grande Prairie Regional Association of Volunteer Organizations, the George Repka Outstanding Achievement Award was awarded to Beth Goldie, and the Bilbo's Organization of the Year Award was awarded to the Grande Prairie Friendship Center this morning at a presentation that was attended by members of council, so thank you for that. And at the museum is Lace Them Up, an interactive sports history exhibit at the Grande Prairie Museum. So it talks about the first advertised sporting event in Grande Prairie, which was in 1910, 2 events that are being hosted to this day. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that exhibit at the museum if you have an opportunity. And with regards to our proposed recreation facility, the engagement program for the facility occurred during the week of November 20th. It involved a session focused on recreation and sports group, followed by a session dedicated to the local neighborhood and a stakeholder meeting. Residents can access the community survey by visiting the project page, and 143 surveys have been submitted. The survey continues to accept responses until December the 8th. So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. That's my report.
Thank you very much. And I know that someone is in the queue. Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. Wow, that report was long. You need a coffee break, I think. Way back in your report, you talked about a grant to the mobile outreach program. What was the grant amount? Do you know?
I'll get that for you. Just
Okay.
off the top of my head, I forget what the grant amount
Is it enough to, run for a week or run for a year?
It was a significant amount,
Okay.
and it was over a number of years. But
Oh.
through email, I will provide that information for council.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Bosch, you stole my question because that was what I was going to inquire about, how much and how long. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions? Okay, we will now move on to 3.2, Alberta 911 Program Standards. Mr. Lemieux, would you please introduce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on our outstanding items list is an item called Alberta 911 Program Standards, and our Deputy Chief, Mr. Van Werkhoven, has done a lot of work on this particular file, and so I'd ask him to review his report for committee.
Go ahead, Mr. Van Werkhoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To effect this motion, Fire Administration has secured a position on the 911 Standards Review Committee hosted by Alberta Emergency Management Agency. This committee has a mandate to recommend 911 standards-based changes with ultimate authority resting with the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. Based on preliminary observations, it appears we would not achieve majority support for mandatory 911 call answer times via this committee. I make this observation based on indications that 911 demand for services and staffing challenges may be impacting primary municipal 911 centers in addition to the secondary 911 centers referenced in the previous report. Having said that, discussion with 911 stakeholders has led to an alternative consideration that may have a high likelihood of support. That being a plan that would see the existing 911 levy increase to align closer to the current Saskatchewan levy, which also adjusts yearly based on the CPI. This corresponding increase in funding would in turn be distributed to primary municipal and secondary 911 centers using the existing formula, which is based on population and call volume. When looking at this alternative from the perspective of our original objective, additional funding could be used to increase capacity and resources of all stakeholders, thereby accomplishing the same objective of eliminating delays in secondary call transfer times. It goes without saying that more funding doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but the same could be argued around our initial approach. Should the committee consider the alternative motion, additional funding for secondary 911 centers could result in additional resources, leading to call answer time improvements, which in turn would result in a decreased time on task for Grande Prairie 911. Based on the degree of additional funding from the increased levy, GP 911 could see a full cost recovery model going forward. And finally, the alternative option may be the better long play and more timely as it relates to the anticipated transition to local police 911 and the potential for an additional percentage of levy funding related to that transition. While we've seen some progress in call transfer times, the issue remains and continues to impact Grande Prairie 911. We're at the committee's discretion in terms of continuing the same course, pivoting to the alternative revenue-based approach, or proceeding with some combination of the two. Regardless of the course, Grande Prairie 911 is grateful for the committee's continued attention and commitment to this matter. Happy to take any questions.
Oh, perfect. Any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Bosch.
Thank you. I guess my question is, if the 15 seconds or less, 95% of the time, where are we at? Is that what we're at? Or are we above that?
Through the chair, we're above that, Councillor Bosch. We typically are above 99%, answering 99% of calls in 15 seconds or less. We obviously through May, June, and the peak of the wildfires, we saw an impact. Eliminating that and just looking through the summer beyond that, we saw dips into the 97%, certainly still above the target, but lower than we've been historically. We're feeling it as well.
Okay. And in the 45 seconds for the secondary, where are we at with standards?
So in terms of the standards of EMS and RCMP and where they
Answering
sort of land,
the call at secondary centers should take under 45 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, that one.
We've seen some, what I would suggest are notable improvements in terms of EMS call transfer times. And as you may recall, the issue with EMS transfer times wasn't necessarily answering the phone. The issue was based on processes and delayed processes in some circumstances. We've seen notable benefits in working with them to align on some of those processes. And in addition, we've actually just last month implemented our new computer-aided dispatch system, which has the ability in the future to create a CAD to CAD link with EMS, meaning we can address those delays even more so than we are now. In terms of secondary transfer to RCMP, we frankly haven't seen much change in that. And we see, I apologize, I don't have the stats right in front of me, but we see consistent and lengthy delays both in average call transfer times and the 90th percentile of the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thiessen and then Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you very much, Chair O'Connor. Thanks for the report, Mr. Van Werkhoven. Question, just for my own, perhaps Councillor Bressie could answer for me too, but we're talking about the 911 cell phone levies. Who pays the levies? Is that the province or is that the cell phone holder?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, that is your cell phone bill, actually. So on your cell phone bill currently, you'll see a 95% charge. That's referred to as a 911 levy. That is in turn turned over to the primary and secondary 911 centers. There's approximately there are 7 provinces that use that same funding process in some form of levy that varies anywhere from 44 cents up to over $2 per month per cell phone. The other provinces don't necessarily, there's a few provinces that don't use that funding method, but they'll typically have some sort of alternative like municipal 911 levy on local taxes. Obviously, the province has taken the position of the cell phone levy, which I would suggest is the majority position in the country.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. And the only reason why I asked that question is because I was looking at the alternatives as I scrolled down, because I was like, couldn't we just lobby AB Munis to make this a resolution at our next convention? So I really appreciate the fact that this was included, because as I was going through the report, my brain clicked to it, and then boom, it was right there as an additional or alternative motion. And I think both are pretty good. Probably an additional motion, but I don't sit on this committee, so I don't have a vote or say in it. Perhaps if it comes to council, but I think committee can do that job too if they wanted to. But thank you very much for the report and for including this.
Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. I will look to Councillor Blackmore.
Just to follow up to Councillor Thiessen's question, because you did include this as an alternative or optional form of action in your report, can you give me like some kind of an estimate of how confident you are that the province will move forward with an increase?
Through the chair, unfortunately, I can't. I can suggest that there would be a number of urban municipalities that I believe would be strongly advocating for this in concert with us. And I say that because this is, first and foremost, from our perspective, GP 911 is a pretty significant shareholder in the 911 system in the province. We're dispatching and 911 call answering for approximately 47% of Alberta's landmass. So from a revenue perspective, obviously this would be more significant for us than, say, others. But I would also suggest places like Strathcona, Red Deer, Lethbridge. There's other big players in the province, urban municipalities that would, I'm quite confident would support us in this. But in terms of what the province would do or where they would land, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Yeah, if they'd given you some kind of strong indication, then this wouldn't necessarily be pertinent. But because you don't know, I would say that this may be a pertinent step to take. But like Councillor Thiessen, I don't sit on this committee.
If I could, I would also note for committee that our Intergovernmental Affairs Director has participated in some of these conversations, and the province, the Alberta 911 program managers have participated in some of these conversations, and at no point have they suggested that this is a hill that we can't climb.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Bressy, just curious, in the steps, do it have it in our purview to recommend going to the alternative option? What do you think of that? Or I just go to Bressy? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Certainly, as directed by this committee, if we were requested by committee to pivot and focus on, so to speak, the carrot before the stick, then we will go back to that committee with that direction in mind and see how far we can go in affecting change at the committee level, at my level, frankly. And if that was unsuccessful, then of course we would come back to committee or work with our Intergovernmental Affairs Director to potentially draft some sort of AB Munis vote prior to the deadline in April.
That would be wonderful, and I will move to Councillor Bressy.
Yeah, I just highlight that back in 2020, we did sponsor a resolution at AB Munis to increase the levy, and that passed with, if I remember right, it was over 80% of the vote. There was definitely some that spoke against it, but it wasn't hard to get past. I'd also point out that in advocacy to the provincial government for increased funding, the response we often get is, well, don't just ask us for more funding, ask us where that funding should come from. This is something where it is specifically not saying, hey, give us magic money off the money tree, but giving a very specific place where it should come from. And I've heard from some of our ministers that they actually do quite favor user fees for increased revenue. So I think this is something that if we did advocate for, I'd have pretty high degree of confidence of getting it passed at AB Munis. And I think the government would at least listen to it with a pretty open ear if it was brought to them.
Yeah, it's, sorry, I appreciate that comment. So it sounds like, Mr. Van Berkhoven, that user pay seems to be the favored movement. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. So I'll look to, if there's no other questions, I'll look to someone to do the business on this part. Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair O'Connor. I'd move that committee receive this report for information.
Thank you. That motion is in order. I call the question. Thank you, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Councilor O'Connor, I have some other business arising.
Okay, business arising. Mayor Clayton.
I would move that committee ask that this item in regards to increase of the 911 charge / levy be added to the next CCW agenda under advocacy.
Okay, I'll just wait for that to be caught up, and we'll. Okay, there's a motion there. So we'll call the question. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Any other business? There is no correspondence. We'll go down to bylaw policy review 6.1. Oh, missed the vehicle for hire. My bad. Okay, go to 5.1, vehicle for hire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll maybe introduce this item. So at our recent council meeting, we had a delegation. Mr. Ravinder Rupana came in with 3 requests to do with our vehicle for hire bylaw, and that was referred to this committee for discussion. So I've asked our Executive Director of Protective Services, Helen Napier, and Sean to join us because they are the subject matter expert. And I've asked them to address those 3 requests that the delegation had on the the last council meeting. So I'll turn it over to Helen.
Thank you, and through the chair. Closer. Okay. Thank you. Through the chair, with me is Chief License Inspector Sean Hebert. So as we all know, during last week's council meeting, there was a delegation who spoke to aspects of the vehicle for hire bylaw, specifically limiting the number of vehicles in a cab company. So some history there is the previous vehicle for hire bylaw had a minimum fleet number of 7 vehicles. It was removed from the current bylaw to allow for companies with less than 7 vehicles to continue operating and allow flexibility for owner-operators to go into business for themselves. Currently, we have 9 companies with less than 7 vehicles in the fleet. Only 1 company is an exclusive dispatch, which is single operator, owner-operator. Considering that, administration does not recommend amending the bylaw to have a minimum number of fleet vehicles per company, as it would negatively impact 9 companies currently in operation. Secondly, the delegation spoke about taxi inspections should be done once per year for less than 5-year-old vehicles. Our inspections are conducted biannually, spring and fall. The inspections are done to ensure the vehicles being utilized as taxis within Grande Prairie are mechanically sound and meet the basic standards for quality control, like cleanliness. Officers also check rate decals and test the taxi meters for accuracy in charges. During the spring-fall inspection cycle for 2023, a total of 226 vehicles were inspected. 64 vehicles failed inspection with a 28% failure rate. Many vehicles do not pass inspection due to minor mechanical issues and other standards that are not met, like burnt out bulbs, incorrect decals, taxi rates not calculating properly on the meter, and cleanliness of vehicle. Taxis can have a large amount of kilometers added to a vehicle per year, estimated at approximately 45,000 per year. This could result in a vehicle on the road that is only 4 years old having 180,000 kilometers. We know mechanical decline correlates to the amount of kilometers driven per year. Therefore, administration does not recommend reducing the number of inspections per year based on the high number of kilometers driven by taxis and the inspection failure rates. Number 3, brought up by the delegation, was vehicles older than 10 years to be prohibited from the taxi industry, citing client safety and mechanical failures. So administration from October 2023, inspections, we've seen a 6-year-old vehicle with 277,000 kilometers on it. We also seen a 14-year-old vehicle with only 215,000 kilometers. So we can see that there's a varying degree of the kilometers on the vehicles. Age of the vehicle alone does not ensure safety due to the varying kilometers. It is the full mechanical inspection and the department's visual inspection that mitigates safety issues. Therefore, administration's recommendation that prohibiting 10-year-old vehicles from the taxi industry would not ensure client safety, nor would it ensure a decrease in mechanical failures. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you very much, Helen. And Councillor Bosch, and then I'll chip in.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. My question is, if I remember correctly, when the delegation was here, there was concerns about dispatching with companies that have like 1 vehicle or 2 vehicles where they're on the phone taking the next call while on a service call. Where does that fit in with this? It's not under. It is under 7, but it's not. Is there a designated dispatch that has to be proven to you?
Yeah, go.
Through the chair. So for the exclusive dispatch, that's something very new to the vehicle for hire bylaw that was introduced in 2021. There's only one company, as Helen had mentioned, that is the exclusive dispatch. And how that works is it's an owner-operator. So they own their car and they operate it as their own dispatch. They have a client list all of their own. Usually, in this instance, the one that we do have is a splinter off from a different company that took his clients with him, sort of deal. And so for them having like an external dispatcher that would call to them and dispatch calls, yeah, they would take their calls personally. While doing it driving, that's something that we didn't take into consideration. If that was the concern that was brought forward by the delegation there, is that that's the allegation, is that this person is taking dispatch calls while they're operating the car. That was never the intention of the bylaw. When we had discussed this, Helen and myself, we see that being addressed. It's the same as anyone else that would be pulled over for distracted driving. It would be covered by legislation, and they would receive a charge. Hopefully, the charging officer, if it's one of our peace officers, would let us know that this is happening, and that's how we would address it.
Just to add there, we have received no complaints of anybody dispatching and driving at the same time. So while it was brought up as a concern, we have nothing to say that it is happening.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we, took that seriously because it was brought to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a point. You said 226 cabs were inspected, and how many failed? Was it 26 or 46?
Mr. Chair, yeah, it was 64, correct.
64. See, it helps if you get hearing aids. That'll work. Thank you very much for that. So it sounds like we're not going to change anything based on your recommendation. Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair O'Connor. I made the motion to bring this forward. As you likely know, I pulled out my little sticky tabs from the things that I wanted to get from this report, and I think I got them. So how many vehicles older than 10 on the road? And then a sub-question was, are they more or less viable than the newer cars? And then how many kilometers a year does any cab drive, and why don't we go off of a kilometer base? And I want to thank you for the verbal report. It was very, very to the points of what I needed to have answered for me, and not to dispute our delegation that came in, but they had viable reasons to try to change it on their end, and those are very worthwhile, I think, in their end. But I think even more worthwhile is our processes to ensure that people who are taking a vehicle for hire are getting to and from their destination safely. So I think you guys covered what I was looking for, and thank you for the work.
Thank you, both of you, for coming in and filling us in on that. There was some great information there, gives us great, yeah, we feel very good about the work that you're doing. Thank you. Mayor Clayton.
Thanks for that, Chair O'Connor. I'm curious, Chief Lemieux and I met with a different cab company than that came to council and shared some of the similar concerns that the delegation did. And with that, in age of cabs and the opportunity that if a driver was released from one company and went to start on their own with one car to be a competitor to existing organizations that have office space and teams, etc., that they may not be holding their operations to the same standard of established organizations within our community. I wonder what sort of procedures or policies have been put in place to be sure that somebody who is a one-off is abiding by the same standards, etc. Sure, they get their business license, the expectation is there, but how do we monitor for ones that may be flying under the radar that aren't operating under a business license, etc.? They just put the name taxi on their car and drive around town.
Through the chair. So one thing that I've found in my time being the Chief License Inspector for the Vehicle for Hires is our active operators that function within the bounds of the bylaw are eyes everywhere. I hear a lot of complaints regarding illegal operators. I'm usually the first one to hear about it, and then I'll send our officers out. All I need is a license plate. And I find our designated driving services, our ride shares, taxis, they're all watching each other and what they're doing, and they hold each other accountable. So, yeah, so whenever something comes up, yeah, we usually hear about it right away for an illegal operator, absolutely.
And if I could, Chair O'Connor, currently is there a process for a consumer, a rider in a taxi, to make a formalized complaint that's easy, other than getting out of the car, trying to find the number, the license plate? Is there, the reason I ask, I was in a taxi in Edmonton the other day and there was a QR code right on the back of the seat, easy for me to scan to share concerns with the organization. It might have even gone directly to Bylaw, I don't know, but I'm just wondering if we currently have any consideration for that.
Through the chair. So we don't currently have that QR system. It has something that's been brought up to us, and that it is definitely something that we can consider doing here. But we want to make it easy, right?
Yeah,
That's the thing, and the QR code seems to be that maybe easiest way. So something we can definitely consider.
So do you need direction from us to consider that? You're good, I just think that seems like a pretty slick system. If somebody has a concern, they can scan the code right there. The driver wouldn't even know they're making a complaint about them, and I just think that that's a relatively seamless process.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we would need an amendment to the bylaw, so it's something we can do. We don't have to amend the bylaw, whichever. If you
Thank you.
like a motion.
Thanks.
That brings up, thanks for that, Mayor Clayton. I flew in a number of years ago, got a cab to come who I thought was reputable. When I went to pay, they didn't have a credit card machine. They said cash only. So I think, to me, that didn't make me feel comfortable, so I didn't use them. Do you get many stories of that, somebody asking for cash?
Through the chair, not very often, unfortunately. Going back to the topic of having that QR code to streamline complaints, oftentimes what I've heard from customers once they finally made their way to enforcement is that they don't know that how involved we are as a city with the regulation of the vehicle for hires. So I think that's a really great system that we could put in place, having a QR code to address that, so that if that happens, instead of calling the company, that's usually what the customer will do, is they'll call the company, the broker, to lodge their complaint, and then I may or may not hear about it after the fact, depending on if this is a prolific offender, like this is something that happens often with this particular driver. But again, unfortunately, I don't hear many of those complaints myself. Usually they go straight through the company.
Okay. Well, I like the QR code idea. So thank you again for coming in and presenting to us. Thank you. Now we will go to 6.1, my favorite topic, regulating wheeled conveyances. And thank you. Please introduce yourself so everybody can hear you.
So, Mr. Chair, with me is Peace Officer Sergeant Ross Gear. A motion was passed directing administration to bring back a proposed bylaw amendment to allow for, within the city limits, the use of e-scooters and e-bikes in the city. At present, the city's Parkland bylaw only sets out rules for the use of bicycles in parklands. The amending bylaw will allow and regulate the use of wheeled conveyances in city parklands, on pathways and trails, and sets out common sense rules for the operation of these devices. Wheeled conveyance is a broad term which includes bicycles, mobility aids, and other micro-mobility devices, including e-bikes and e-scooters. If passed, the Director of Parks will publicize approved wheeled conveyances on the city's website. Appendix B of the report shows an example of such a designation from the City of Calgary. In addition, administration will raise public awareness about the use of wheeled conveyances on the city's pathways and trails and will publicize the applicable rules. It should be noted that the amending bylaw will not regulate the use of wheeled conveyances on sidewalks, since some wheeled conveyances, such as privately owned e-scooters, are already prohibited under provincial law. We are also aware that Alberta Municipalities is currently advocating for amendments to the Traffic Safety Act to fully regulate e-scooters. So administration's recommendation is to have committee recommend council give 3 readings to the Parkland amending bylaw. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we'll, anyone having any questions, Councillor Bosch?
Thank you. In your report, you said that was for trails and trails and roads, right?
Pathways and trails.
Pathways and trails. So does that include like the unicycle wheeled thing, or there's more than scooters, right?
There's pictures on the very end.
Yeah. Or the hoverboards, things like that.
So through the chair, so it's going to be up to the parks director to designate which ones are allowed on the trails and pathways. Well, our thought process is right now that we will probably go very similar to what Calgary has allowed and not allowed. So Appendix B of your report. So the unicycle, the personal transporter is another name for it, is something that potentially could be allowed on our pathways and trails.
So someone couldn't go from their house to the trail. They'd have to carry it or tow it, and then once they're on the trail. Also, yeah. That's not convenient, is it?
Through the chair, that is correct, because the sidewalk is defined as a highway under the Traffic Safety Act, and that is a prohibited vehicle.
So bicycles are okay, except there's certain sidewalks that you can't ride a bicycle on a sidewalk either, right?
Through the chair, yes, you can, Councillor Bosch.
You can ride a bicycle on a sidewalk?
On a sidewalk, yes.
Okay.
You have to follow the same rules as a pedestrian. When you're on a sidewalk, a bicycle is basically considered a pedestrian. When they're out on a road, like we saw when we had the tour here in Grande Prairie, then they're considered a vehicle.
So I've seen people being asked to get off their bikes on the sidewalk, let's say at the street performers or something like that. Is it just because it's public safety issue because of the volume of people, or should they have been asked to get off?
Through the chair, I really can't answer that because I don't know what the permit said. With the street performance, that was a cordoned off area, and I'm sure there were different rules in there.
Okay.
With a lot of people, it might be different.
Okay.
But generally speaking, it is allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Blackmore?
This is kind of a theoretical question, I guess. So if you have an electric bicycle, which you're by provincial law not allowed to drive on the sidewalk, but if you're pedaling it and not using electricity to power it, it's then a pedal bike. So Helen's shaking her head.
Yeah, I can give it. Yeah, Through the chair, I think it's because it's defined as a motor vehicle. So it's not about how you're using it. It's because it meets the definition of a motor vehicle under the Traffic Safety Act.
And do you feel that the provincial government may be making some forward momentum in updating their rather archaic traffic safety laws?
Through the chair, we don't have any information that it's going to change. I think, like we've seen at Alberta municipalities, there is cities need this to be changed because it's causing, issues in regulating the devices. So we don't have information saying that they are going to, but there's been that advocacy piece done to get them to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chairman O'Connor. So I got this straight, so we're going to allow electric-assisted bicycles on pathways and trails and stuff. That's what the report is leading to believe. I guess I kind of agree with Councillor Blackmore. Like, the province needs to step up their game as far as updating their standards for the roads. I just decided to Google search average speed of an electric bike, and they're from 25 to 32 miles per hour on the average. Miles per hour, not kilometers per hour. And the fastest e-bike currently in creation is the Delfast Top 3.0 with an impressive 50 mile per hour top speed. So for me, that concerns me, not just for passing on the trails, but going around blind corners on the trails too, without giving anybody a heads up. If somebody just wants to joyride and see how fast their e-bike can go on a dusky night in the middle of Grande Prairie, that's kind of what Councillor O'Connor was alluding to in the fact that when he brought this bylaw forward over a year ago now. And I get it, we're trying to fight back against what's already legislated in the province, but for me, I see electric bikes as coming more and more online, and I'd be concerned if I had a small child, like loosely holding my hand, walking on the trails, knowing that we might have 200 e-bikes going up the trails, ripping at their fastest speed, between 28 and 30 miles per hour. So that's a concern for me, because at 50 kilometers an hour, that's where we start seeing deaths due to collisions and stuff like that. And these bikes are already there. So that's my concern with this. I don't have a say on this committee, but I know why Councillor O'Connor brought it forward, and I had similar concerns because I dodged an e-bike, on one of the dirt trails, and I was like, "Whoa, don't you have a bell?" And they didn't have a bell either. So I think we need to put a bit more thought on this than just, hey, you know what, it's allowable, because we don't want one death happening or one major injury, and I don't think the province is pulling up their socks on this one.
Just one sec. Any comments? No?
Through the chair, I can add one piece in your in the proposed bylaw 20.2B. It does have operate at a speed in a manner that is reasonable given the existing environment conditions, including but not limited to weather, visibility, and traffic congestion. And I think the purpose to leave it in that language is for just what you said: corners, visibility, those types of things. And if it's wet or whatever, and the officer would be responsible for making observations of the environment at that time. So,
okay, I'll come back to you, Councillor Bosch.
Thank you. I guess that is my question in regards to not putting a speed, or at least a minimum or a maximum, I guess, a maximum speed, because the enforcement side of it is, objective based, right? And so I don't know how that would be a bylaw if it's just, there's nothing definite to it. How do you enforce something like that?
Through the chair, and by all means, you can chime in here, but one of the things we talked about is there's so many places to enter a pathway or a trail in our system. It would be almost impossible to get the speed limits posted in every place that you would need them, so everybody's aware. So that was one of the considerations. We are quite aware that if we have to lay a charge, it's going to be based on the quality of the work that the officer is doing. Documentation, what they've seen, maybe it's pictures, those types of things. So it could cause some problems if we had to do a charge, but this is a last resort anyway, because we always want to do the education piece first.
Right, but could you not statistically look at numbers as a maximum speed? So let's say it's 20 kilometers an hour, nothing past that, period.
Through the chair, we could certainly do that.
Okay. Before I go to,
Oh, he's not done.
oh, sorry.
Through the chair, we certainly could, but then it becomes a question of enforcement. And that's going to be a bit of a bear considering how many trails we have, how many pathways we have throughout the city that are used extensively. So, I mean, we're going to be out there because we do that as a matter of daily stuff, but it would be difficult.
Yes. Before I go to President Thiessen, I'm glad that you put some teeth. Now you have the ability to, and I think speed limit is a key factor, but staying on the right, wearing a helmet, good luck with that one. I think you're going to find you're going to have to give a number of warning tickets out to let people know. And then, but I've been passed on both sides by guys on bikes, and it scares the living daylights out of you. So anyway, Councillor Bressie.
Well, my first ever ticket I received was a Calgary bylaw officer with a radar gun catching me on the North Glenmore Reservoir path and right in grade 9 dealing a ticket. And it sure was a learning lesson for me in terms of riding my bike. I sure, as a kid, it was a lot of money. And I sure rode my bike differently after that. I wish I could say it applied to me when I got my driver's license, but so definitely I've got no problem with stronger enforcement if we need it. But I'm kind of curious, we're talking about bylaws, which are kind of the lowest level of consequence and laws for people. If somebody collided with somebody on our path because they were operating an e-bike or something like that in an unsafe manner, there'd be potential municipal fines. There'd also definitely be civil action that could be taken. Are there any criminal code or higher level government laws that would kick in if somebody was going 30 and mowed over somebody on the walk and changed their life because of how much they injured them?
Through the chair, that's a great question. It really comes. I just want to clarify one thing about e-bikes. We talked about e-bikes that could go 50 miles per hour. Well, they would be prohibited under federal law. We get the definition of an e-bike from federal law that's passed down to provincial law, and through federal law, 32 kilometers an hour is the maximum that an e-bike can go. So anything beyond that would be actually prohibited. An e-bike is not a motor vehicle, so there could be no motor vehicle charges. But if it was prohibited, if it was exceeding that 32 kilometers per hour, then it becomes a prohibited miniature vehicle, and that becomes a motor vehicle. So yes, there possibly could. I don't think it's ever been explored. It'd be very interesting, but we would look at. Of course, we always start at the lowest, but depending on the seriousness, we would go up.
Before I go to Mr. Thiessen, right now there are a number of people that call me and say, I've almost been hit. A lady got hit, but there are no reports. I think the last time you did your research, when I brought this up a year ago, there were no complaints sent. And I just want to make sure those that are listening, if you have a close call, call 311 and report it. If you don't report it, they have no way of having a record if there are close calls and whether or not they have to pay attention. Am I not correct?
Through the chair, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair O'Connor. I have so much appreciation for you guys because you're literally building the e-bike policy as we're riding it down the street without any heads up from the province here. So thank you for the work that's gone into this. My thoughts currently on as the bylaw stands is it seems like any fines that might be levied would only be punitive after the worst case scenario of a pedestrian getting hit and investigation being commenced, the insurance adjusters getting involved, and then all of a sudden you get this extra bylaw ticket because you contravened the bylaw. It's got me thinking that perhaps e-bikes shouldn't necessarily be considered the same as e-scooters or even as regular bicycle conveyances. And the reason I say that is because e-scooters can only go up to a certain speed and definitely doesn't hit the max threshold or the top max threshold of what can be created with e-bikes. But I remember being part of the discussion about having bike lanes in the city of Grande Prairie, and then council decided to just widen the sidewalk since we didn't have a bylaw against riding your bike on the sidewalk, so that people could just pass fairly and we didn't have to worry about traffic safety and bikes going on the road. But I'm starting to look at e-bikes as similar to something that maybe we should just limit to the road. You know, you're paying for the horsepower, you're paying for the charge. Most people that have e-bikes in British Columbia, they only engage the e-bike when they're driving up the mountains. Otherwise, they're like, cool. But we don't have that luxury here in Grande Prairie. And so, yeah, part of my thoughts on this is maybe it's a roadworthy exercise where we actually limit e-bikes to the road and, you know, prohibit the sidewalk travel or the pathway travel. I get that kicks out of somebody's fun, but we don't want a worst case scenario where a little wandering 4-year-old gets like hit by accidents, right? It's not good for the rider and it's not good for the people impacted.
Mayor Clayton.
I was going to say that I do know in many BC municipalities that e-bikes are on paved trails. I've spent a lot of time on e-bikes in Whistler. Friends of ours have them there. And there is signs that you're intended to abide by, but you don't have to ride on the road. You ride on the paved trails. So,
Okay. Councillor Bosch.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Mayor Clayton because not all e-bikes have that significant amount of power. I think you could eliminate issues if you had a maximum speed, regardless of what it was. And I don't know what that is. Maybe there is some sort of, standard. Is it 10 kilometers? Is it 15, 20 kilometers an hour? That is standard in other communities. I would like that added to the bylaw so that it covers whether it's a wheel or an e-bike, whatever it is. If they're not going over 20 kilometers an hour on a trail, that would limit, hopefully, any like issues of severe collision or death, right? There's got to be statistics that back that.
I can, through the chair. So the one thing, there's a couple of things I wanted to say there about, the discussion about the e-bikes. We've set this bylaw up so that we can add devices, remove them as needed without having to amend the bylaw. So that is one good thing, the way it's been written. Again, about the speeds, because you got hills, because you could have a 90-degree turn, it's going to be an exercise for sure to go in there and put the right speeds on every turn, corner, hill, those types of things. So it's not that it can't be done, but we need to be aware of what we're entering into. And we have quite a few kilometers of trails and pathways. We got paved, unpaved, so it's just a consideration before you make a decision.
It feels like a free-for-all at the moment.
So, for want of time, I really appreciate the report. Do you have something to add? Okay.
Roadways in Grande Prairie are 50 kilometers an hour unless otherwise posted. That's pretty standard information. Is that not something that you can do on trails without an excessive amount of signage? Is that unless otherwise posted, the speed limit on the trails is
20 kilometers.
Pick a number.
Through the chair, that is absolutely something that we can look into. But just, if you got a hill, you got a turn, you're going to change it based on probably if there's a need to slow it down, right? So we could still run into quite a bit of signage that's required to make this happen.
Yeah. I will go to our solicitor, Jamie?
Thank you through the chair. I think part of the challenge too with setting out a 20-kilometer-an-hour limit is that sets the standard then in the bylaw. So the question becomes who's had a photo radar measurement on site. And in the case of what we're dealing with here, which is parklands, pathways, and trails, the answer is going to be no one. So the goal was to create a standard of exercise a reasonable speed given all of the circumstances, and hopefully being able to, in the unfortunate event of having to lay a ticket and run it through a prosecution, being able to rely on eyewitness testimony which said, look, he was racing. I don't know if he was doing 50 or 60 or 70, but he was moving far too fast given the number of people using the trail at that time. And you never know for sure which way the court will go with the arguments being raised. And of course, different facts can come to light, but that was estimated to be a more likely chance of success in the event that a ticket had to be laid and a trial had to proceed.
Okay. Thank you for that. I would like to have someone do business, please. Great, Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair O'Connor. I would move that committee recommend council give 3 readings to the Parkland amending Bylaw C-1310A as amended.
Okay.
The amending bylaw. So.
Okay, thank you. I will call the question. That was carried unanimously. And we'll go to the outstanding items list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the outstanding items list, today we dealt with 1269 and 1234, so those two can be removed. And I would ask that we change 1258 and 1251 to Q1 2024, please.
Okay, and Councillor Bosch.
Thank you. I move committee receive December 5th outstanding items list as amended for information.
Thank you. Call the question.
Well, no, I have something to add.
Okay, before we adjourn, Mayor Clayton.
I'm just suggesting that the next standing committee will probably take a minimum of 30 minutes. So I'm looking for council's support that we take a 30-minute break, which would put us back at 10 after 1 for the start of the next committee. All right?
Yep. So you want to make that motion? Or
Doesn't need
just go ahead. Okay. We will adjourn this meeting. We'll be taking a 30-minute break so that some of us can get sustenance. So thank you.